Well, a warm hello to all my lovely viewers and subscribers. This time I'm doing another Puritan paperback, one that I wish I could spend a lot of time on because, it was just such a good one. The Secret Key to Heaven, The Vital Importance of Private Prayer by Thomas Brooks. And this was a very, very impressionable Puritan paperback. This one, I would say it inspired my master's thesis. I wrote a whole thesis on prayer, a whole long 82 pages. But this book, I read it like the semester, maybe the year before actually, but as part of a bundle of books on prayer because I thought to myself, this was something I wanted to grow in. And Thomas Brooks, he just was amazing in this book. So if there's any book I could recommend, it is this one. I've given this out to a few people. It is a little bit thicker. This one is 276 pages, but every page filled with goodness on why you should pray. So we can start with a little bit of an overview. Here, again, there's a lot of small, short chapters, many little points. And first he starts off with, the main verse. So I'll get to that in a second. And in part 2, 20 arguments for private prayer. So there's a bunch of them. I'm not going to go into all 20. And then here the list continues as to why Christians should be praying. And how do you use and apply this doctrine? So there's ways that private prayer is neglected. And then why you should continue in private prayer. Here, objections. There's always common objections towards prayer. And then some instructions. Some ways to pray better. And here, the last parts. Again, some more advice. Some other improvements. Other ways you can improve in prayer. And I suppose before I get to the next one, the main verse that he takes is from Matthew 6:6. So there it's when Jesus talks about prayer. And then he says, when you pray, go into that room and then shut the door behind you. So there he just takes that verse, that little passage there, and just brings out a whole book out of that verse. And there's a lot of things that he drew out. There are a lot of good points in this book. So whatever I tell you here, there's only a few of his points that I'm really drawing out. Perhaps before I even get to the first quote, one of his best points of why should you do private prayer? Because I think Christians, they do pray corporately quite a bit. Maybe it is a little bit easier to pray with other people, but then private prayer is something just that most people will find difficult. So why should you pray in secret? And then Brooks, he goes into this point that God often reveals his secrets to you in private, similar to how if you had a loved one, a beloved, so more than just a loved one, but like a spouse or a lover, when you're intimate with each other, just one-on-one, that's when you open your heart to one another. So likewise, in prayer, that's where Christians tend to find that, not only as they pour out their heart to God, that's sort of the definition that Brooks uses, prayer is pouring out your heart to God, but God reveals things to you. So some of these quotes that I'm about to pull up will sort of elaborate on this idea that, in secret, God reveals jewels, gems to you, gems from his word. So the first quote comes from his reason number 20. So the Lord's secret ones should engage in secret prayer. And then here it's enjoy God in a corner. And it is only God's hidden ones, his secret ones, that are spirited, principled, and prepared to wait on God in secret. Exodus 19:5. Then shall ye be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. The Hebrew word segolah signifies God's special jewels, God's proper ones, or God's secret ones, that he keeps in store for himself and for his own special service and use. Princes lock up with their own hands in secret their most precious and costly jewels. And so does God his. Psalm 135:4. For the Lord hath chosen Jacob unto himself, and Israel for his peculiar treasure, or for his secret gem. Psalm 83:3. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones, or thy secret ones. So called partly because God hides them in the secret of his tabernacle. Psalm 31:20. And partly because God sets as high a value upon them as men do upon their hidden treasure, their secret treasure. Yes, he makes more reckoning of them than he does of all the world besides. And so the world shall know, when God shall arise to revenge the wrongs and injuries that have been done to his secret ones. So his last reason out of his 20 reasons for persevering in secret prayer is God treasures you. If you are a Christian, you are part of God's treasure. And God, he does talk about his people in this way that, they are my treasured possession. So you are a jewel. And God, he will reward time and secrets. And then here, the next quote is very short, just up here. Whet is no let. Prayer and provender never hinders a journey. And you might be thinking, what in the world does whet is no let even mean? Like, it's old language, right? Well, whet is like to sharpen. So here it's this idea that, if you had a job where, let's say you're a chef, and you had to sharpen a knife. Well, by sharpening your knife, you're not losing any time at all for your job. Instead, you're becoming more efficient and more ready for the things you have to do, right? A sharper knife, it helps you cut things through faster. And there's a similar idea here with prayer. That if you go into prayer, you're actually not losing any time. And instead, you're actually made sharper, spiritually sharp. You're made more ready for what God has called you to do. And this was such a good point that Thomas Brooks made, because I think in this age where everything is just so fast-paced, if you had to cut something out, like I'm talking about, in ministry, if you had to cut something out, it is almost always prayer. Prayer is almost always the first thing to go. Instead of anything else that could be cut out, an extra worship song or, time from the sermon, all these things, they're all important, yes. But prayer tends to be the part that is always, maybe not always, but most often cut off. But here, Brooks, he's really emphasizing this point that private prayer is just so important. So if you do spend time in private prayer, you're actually not losing any time. Instead, you're gaining it. And Martin Luther, if you've ever heard stories about his prayer life, he would spend every day, spending about 2 hours in prayer every single day. And then there's a quote that one day he said, "There's so much I have to do, I must spend 3 hours in prayer." So when Luther had more to do, instead of taking time away from his time in prayer, he spent more time in prayer. Now, so here, that's what Brooks is getting at. And the next quote here is a quote on that idea of intimacy. Well, I'll have to find it actually. It seems like I've misplaced myself. And I found it because I did not bookmark it. But here, this is where we find this idea that God reveals his secret things to you in intimacy. It's only one-on-one that God really reveals these things. So here, if you look at the bottom of the page, so when Daniel was at private prayer, God dispatches a heavenly messenger to him, and his errand was to open more clearly and fully the blessed scripture to him. Some comfortable and encouraging knowledge this holy man of God had attained to before by his frequent and constant study in the word, and this eggs him on to private prayer, and private prayer sends an angel from heaven to give him a clearer and fuller light. Private prayer is a golden key to unlock the mysteries of the word to us. The knowledge of many choice and blessed truths is but the outcome of private prayer. The word most dwells richly in their hearts who are most in pouring out their hearts before God in their closets. So here, he is saying that God, he reveals the secrets of his word to his people in private prayer. And if you've spent time in private prayer, I think you'll find that this is true. That you might have read something that was just so unclear to you. You wonder, how do I make sense of this passage? And then you rack your brain over it, nothing comes to you. And then you're like, oh, it's time to pray, right? So you go into prayer, And then as you pray, you find that God reveals, the meaning of the passage. All the time that you spent thinking you couldn't figure it out, but then as you went to prayer, God showed you the meaning. So again, it points to the idea of like intimacy and God revealing secrets only in private. That's the importance, right, of what Jesus said. Go into the room, shut that door behind you. No one, let no one interrupt your time with God. And then here, God, when he's intimate, when he's with you one-on-one, he will reveal the secrets of his word to you. And now to the actual quote. Again here. So here he says, "Eighthly, I answer that servants should rather redeem time from their sleep, their recreations, their daily meals, than neglect their daily closet duty." And I don't think I need to read much more from there, but very straightforward. Brooks, he's encouraging people, take time out of your day, whether it be from your sleep, from your recreations, whatever, kind of things you spend your free time on, your daily meals. Take away time from those rather than neglecting time in private prayer. That's how important private prayer is. More important than your sleep, more important than your meals, more important than any entertainment. And of course, it is far better than any entertainment as well. And again, it just highlights, Brooks just saw the importance of private prayer. For us today, I think we might be prone to thinking, well, I must eat. I must eat, I must drink, I must sleep, or else I won't have any strength. Or I must have, some time over here to relax. But here, I wonder, here there was a thought that I had, do we ever see private prayer as something I yearn for? This is like my greatest rest. And I think oftentimes it's rare that we do. The moment I have any free time, I'm just so ready to let that time almost go away. But if I have free time, do I think, oh, now I have time to pray. Now I have time to meet God in secrets. And it's rare that I do. But private prayer, if you do truly value it, especially a communion with God, one of these other quotes I'm going to pull up will talk about that communion with God. If that's your greatest joy, then isn't private prayer one of the best things for you as a Christian? One of the best ways for you to spend any free time that you have. So that's something to consider there. And of course, the next quote highlights this. Bottom of the page. "Fifthly, consider you cannot have too frequent communion with God. You cannot have too frequent conversation with Jesus. You cannot have your hearts too frequently filled with joy unspeakable and full of glory, and with that peace that passes understanding. You cannot have heaven too frequently brought down into your hearts, and you cannot have your hearts too frequently carried up to heaven. And therefore you cannot be too frequent in closet prayer." And then on the next page, his next point, 6th point, it's about sin. Consider how often you're under frequent needs, you have frequent sins, frequent snares, frequent temptations, frequent allurements, frequent trials, frequent frequent cares, and frequent fears, and frequent favors. So then that's why you have to be frequent, or you must be with God often, in your closet, in private. And again, there's just, can you have too much time with God? Can you have too much of God? And the answer is no, once again. I think too often we are starved, right? Spiritually, we've all been so starved. We have not spent enough time with God in communion. And private prayer, you'll never ever hear a Christian say, oh, I've spent too much time in private prayer. Oh no, I've lost so much time just praying to God in private, talking to God in private. I wish I spent less time in private prayer. You never hear a Christian say that, because it's just, you can never get too much. And instead, I think we do ignore the truth that we have too little time. We have too little time in prayer. And then the last quote I'll pull up is here. "Whenever you go into your closets, press hard after real and sensible communion with God, that so you may come out of your closets with some shines of God upon your spirits, as Moses came down from the mount with his face shining. Exodus 34:29-35. Oh, do not take up in your closet prayers, or tears, or joys, or enlargements, but labor and long to enjoy that inward and close fellowship with God in your closets, as may leave such a choice and sweet savor of God, both upon your hearts and lives, as others may be forced to say, surely these have been with Jesus. It is sad when Christians return from their closets to their shops, their trades, their families, their commerce, etc., without the least visible rays of divine glory upon them. Oh, sirs, closet prayer will be found to be but a dry, sapless, lifeless, heartless, comfortless thing if you do not enjoy communion with God in it. Communion with God is the very life, soul, and crown of all your closet duties. Therefore, press after it as for life. When you go into your closets, let everything go that may hinder your fruition of Christ, and let everything be embraced that makes way for your enjoyment of Christ. Oh, let closet prayer be a golden bridge, a ferry boat, a chariot to convey your souls over to God, and to bring you into a more intimate communion with God. Let no closet duty satisfy you or content you wherein you have not conversed with God, as a child converses with his father, or as a wife converses with her husband, or as a friend converses with his friend, even face to face. Nothing speaks out more unsoundness, falseness, and baseness of heart than this, when men make duty the end of duty, and prayer the end of prayer. Then when men can begin a duty and go on in a duty and close up a duty and bless and stroke themselves after a duty, and yet never enjoy the least communion with God in the duty. So here again, was just pray until you pray is a quote you probably heard, and here Brooks is really saying that, pray and really enjoy God. Don't just pray because you have to, but pray because you want to meet God. Pray because you want to commune with God. And that should be what fills your soul. It should leave your face shining like Moses did after talking to God. There should be some evidence that you've spent time with God and you've been changed. There's a glow to you because you've talked to the author of life. Now there's life in you. But of course, that's easier said than done. Praying and truly, truly, truly enjoying prayer, that is a hard thing. So if you struggle with that, I sympathize. I struggle with it too. And one more quote that I didn't pull up, but there's a little principle that's helpful. If you find that you're struggling with temptation, you find that, Satan sets his sights on you and you're so easily tempted, Brooks, he encourages you to pray, because then you're harder to target. So you can imagine if you're maybe shooting something with a bow or with a gun, if the target is standing still, then it's easier to hit than if it were moving in motion. So prayer, Brooks says, it makes you, go in motion. So when Satan tries to tempt you, when he tries to attack you, if you spent time in private prayer, then you're in motion. You're much harder to hit. But if you've neglected that duty, if you haven't prayed, then you're just a sitting target. You're easy for Satan to attack, right? You're just standing still, and bang, he can hit you with temptation. So there's another encouragement to prayer. And there's just so much more I could say about this book. I got some personal thoughts. This was a book that really, I think, put it on my heart that, I need to pray more. Brooks does mention that it's a duty that we experience on this side of eternity. Once we enter eternity, there will be no more prayer. So it's a duty that's only on this side. And we should try to take advantage of that. Enjoy it as much as we can before this duty disappears. And he talks time and time again, but God will reward private prayer. There's, for every duty, there must be a reward. So that's one of the encouragements to pray more. And along with everything else, I think they're just such a good arguments for why every Christian should be someone who wrestles much with God in private prayer. Whet is no let. That one has always stuck with me. If I want to do something for the Lord, if I have some ministry task before me, I must pray. If I do not pray, I'm going to be very dull very inefficient. And just like a dull knife, it's going to take so much longer. But if I prayed, then I've sharpened myself. I'm more fit and more ready for the task. So, Brooks, I'm trying to think of if there was any other very notable things that he talked about. He does talk, towards the end, he does talk a lot about secret sins, the dangers of secret sins, and how private prayer will set you free from secret sins, both the dangers and the temptation of it. And that definitely plays a part into it, because prayer, it does allow you to examine yourself. You see your heart a little bit more clearly as you come to God. But private prayer is just something that we neglect. If there's anything that I wish I did more of, it's pray. I wish I prayed more and then acted upon my prayers. Like I looked for the answer to those prayers. And far too often I prayed just for duty's sake, right? I prayed because I know, I read my Bible, and here I'm supposed to pray afterwards. But have I truly prayed because I've wanted more of God? Have I sought those secret times, gone to my room, shut the door, where no one can disturb me? No one can disturb this sweet time of fellowship and communion with God, where God will reveal to me, secrets from His Word, treasures from His Word, and give me a sense of His presence. A time where, I'm just filled with joy of being in the presence of my Maker, and then coming out of it with this glow on my face. I may suffer trials, I may suffer affliction, but God, I've met with God, and that's plenty for my soul. So, I think this one is actually due for a bit of a reread. I read this quite a while ago, so that's why it's fairly unmarked. But it's just such a good book. Like, if you want to grow in prayer, just read this book. This Thomas Brooks, he's full of so much good wisdom. There are other books that I've read on prayer, ones that are a little bit more academic, but this one, Brooks, is just, he gives you all these biblical truths, gives you all these other stories to reinforce those truths, and it helps you apply it. Like, why is private prayer just so important? 276 pages. You must pray. It is the best thing that you can do for your soul. If you are one of God's beloved ones, God will meet with you. So meet with Him. You can never meet Him too much. You can never have too much conversation with Him. And every time, it's never a waste of time. So, if that's not enough reason to pray, I don't know what is, but get this book. I think the church and every Christian is better if we spent more time in private prayer. And then from there we move to corporate prayer. But Brooks, he makes his point too. If we don't pray in private, God will not hear you in public. So we must meet with the Lord in secret. And that's still true for me. Having read this book, having read a whole thesis on prayer and read other books on prayer, I still do not pray enough. But we can always grow. So that's the hope. And God, He will not cast us away if we go to Him. So, hope this has been helpful. And again, hope to see you in the next video, probably next week. So grace to you and peace.